Hi there, welcome back to another episode of Life After High School for Students with Disabilities. I'm Catherine Koslick with Hart County Schools, and we are so excited today to talk to Carolyn Wheeler. Carolyn is a project director at the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky. Carolyn has a wealth of experience, over 35 years of experience.
I'm only 22. I started when I was 10, but anyway.
Working in this field, and actually personally you have served as power of attorney and the financial planner for an individual with an intellectual disability, helping her plan for the future and organize her finances. So you have a lot of personal experience with this as well, so that's wonderful. Carolyn, my first question is waivers. I get questions about waivers all the time from families and parents. Where do people start to research waivers, find out about different waiver programs, and learn how to apply and potentially qualify for those programs?
Well, that is a really, really important issue for people, Katie. And so my recommendation is that really the thing that you want to look at first is probably to contact your local community mental health center. And for those of you in the Hart County area, that would be CommuniCare. So I've pulled up the website for CommuniCare. And so this is their homepage. The phone number actually that you could contact, they've got a 24-hour hotline, or you can call toll free. But essentially you're wanting to get connected with the developmental and intellectual disabilities service component of CommuniCare. And actually someone within that service area should be able to help you apply to be on one of the waivers, at least to be at the present time, to be on the waiting list. Now, not all of the waivers are listed here on their website, but I'm actually going to show you where you can find all of them. So, but this would be the place to me that you would start. So I'm going to recommend that you go to our website. So it's hdi.uky.edu. So as Katie said, I am with the Human Development Institute at the University of Kentucky, and actually Katie was a research assistant when she was a graduate student at UK, and I met her then several years ago, and so it's great to reconnect. I'm now seeing her in her professional role and capacities. So I'm going to scroll down on our homepage, and you'll see that we have a disability resource guide online. And you can see there are a number of categories, but in order to understand the waivers, you would want to click on Community Living. So once that opens, this has a description of all of the publicly funded resources to help people to be as independent as possible, contributing members of society, either through Medicaid waivers, or also there are some state general fund programs that I also want to mention. So I'm going to skip over the acquired brain injury waivers because your sons and daughters, that wouldn't be the applicable waiver for them. Do want you to point out the Centers for Independent Living. Now there's one in Louisville, there's one in Lexington. But you might want to check out their website to see if there's any resources for you there. The Hart Supported Living Program is, as it says here on the website, is available to people who meet the ADA definition of disability. So some of your young adult children, frankly, may or may not actually meet the criteria for the Michelle P. waiver or the Supports for Community Living waiver, depending on the nature of their disability. And so you might want to consider the Hart Supported Living Program. Now, you do not have to be Medicaid eligible for this program. There are some financial requirements, but they're a lot higher than it would be for a person to qualify for Medicaid. And so you essentially apply for Hart Supported Living, and actually the application is April 1st. So either you're really early or maybe you're too late in order to apply for the Hart Supported Living program for this year. So I'm going to click on the link. And here's a complete description of what it is, what the purpose of it is. So again, essentially it's a grant program. So it provides a broad category of highly flexible individualized services that, when combined with natural unpaid or other eligible paid supports, provide the necessary assistance to do the following. And you can read what's here on the screen, but essentially it's really about trying to help people to be as independent and as integrated as possible into the larger community. And so on this website, you can also get information about the application. You can get information about eligibility. And then Hart Supported Living is administered through the Department for Aging and Independent Living Services. There are regional Hart Supported Living coordinators. And so yours is, you could contact Ms. Morrison to get additional information. You do need to know that there are very limited funds. I don't want to mislead you and just say, oh, just fill out an application and you'll automatically get it. That's not the case. However, applications are scored based on need and also based on really the extent to which you've made a good case for why you need the services, and then you have a budget that really backs up that application. And so once a person receives Hart supported living, they have to then each year submit a plan indicating what they're going to do with the funding, but they don't have to reapply. There also is no waiting list for Hart supported living program. People just need to continue to apply. So again, this has worked very well, say, for example, for young adults who are deafblind but may not have an intellectual disability, or for those adults who may be on the autism spectrum, but the impact of the autism is not so significant as to make them eligible for one of the Medicaid waivers, but could make them eligible, but they would be eligible for Hart supported living. So I would encourage you to consider that. Also, Hart supported living can fund one-time expenses. There are families who have applied for Hart supported living in order maybe to do a modification to their home, or to perhaps do a one-time expense that in order can again help their family member to be more independent in the community. So we're going to go back to the website. The home and community-based waiver is intended for people who would meet nursing home level of care. And so there's a brief description, that's what it says. And so there actually are children and young adults who do meet the criteria for the home and community-based waiver, who may in fact be on the waiting list for the Michelle P. waiver, because there are more services available through them, or there are additional hours available to people through the Michelle P. waiver. So again, if you click on the link from our website, it will take you to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. The home and community-based waiver is managed through the Department for Medicaid Services. And so this gives you a description of what the services are. And so there are families who do have this waiver who may then be able to take advantage especially of respite care, so non-specialized and specialized respite care. They may also get attendant care to help with bathing and other kinds of physical activities in the home. They may have been able to use some of the funding to help with environmental and minor home adaptations. There is currently no waiting list for the home and community-based waiver. So this would give you information again on how to apply. Now, and why I took you to the CommuniCare website first, all applications for all of the waivers, not the Hart supported living program, but the waivers, the home and community-based waiver, the Michelle P. waiver, and the supports for community living waiver is through the Benefied Self-Service Portal. And someone at CommuniCare should be able to help you apply on Benefied to get on the waiting list. So I'm not going to click on that website, but just want to point that out to you. It's no longer that you just make a phone call. It really is a process that includes your going online and completing an application online. Now, all of the waivers, a family member can either, or the person who receives the services can either choose to work directly with an agency, or they can participant direct. So that's one of the wonderful things about waivers, is that you really have a choice of doing traditional services where you're going to get all of your services through an agency, or you're going to participant direct, where you're going to find all of your own employees and hire them and complete all the required documentation and make sure that timesheets get to the right place, or you can do a combination of the two. And that, for this particular waiver, only applies to attendant care, the environmental and minor home adaptation, and non-specialized respite care. So I'm going to skip over the home care program because that's for older people and housing. So we're going to keep going down here to Michelle P. waiver. Now I'm going to assume that many of you listening to this recording are familiar with the Michelle P. waiver. And so what you may or may not know, and actually, Katie, what you may or may not know, is that the Michelle P. waiver came about because of a lawsuit.
Okay, I did not know that. I just hear
well, like, where is the name? Why is it called Michelle P.? Where does that come from? So back in about 2002, maybe 2003, Jim Desenroth, who is Michelle Phillips's grandfather, actually approached Kentucky Protection and Advocacy, and there were several other people who became what are called plaintiffs in a lawsuit. So that Protection and Advocacy sued the Cabinet for Health and Family Services about the waiting list. So there's this long waiting list for the supports for community living waiver. There hadn't been a very large expansion of funding. So you just have lots of people in need. And so I think it was 2006 when Governor Fletcher was governor of Kentucky. He and then Mark Birdwhistle, who was the secretary for the Cabinet for Health and Family Resources, reached a settlement with Protection and Advocacy to create another waiver. Essentially, it's called SCL Lite. Because it's similar to the supports for community living waiver, but it doesn't have residential services. So the agreement or the settlement agreement is that there would be enough funding to bring down federal funds to serve 10,500 people at approximately 40 hours a week of service, with a budget of somewhere for between 40,000 to 63,000. So that's still quite a bit of money.
Yes.
And one of the things I want everyone to understand, especially if you're not involved in advocacy, is that the only way these waivers grow is if the current governor and the current General Assembly allocate more funding.
Okay, interesting. I guess I thought money was put into that program every year.
No, we wish, But as we all know, there are lots of things competing for limited tax dollars, right? So right now, stay tuned for the federal level, but right now the way all waivers work, home and community-based waivers work everywhere in the country, is there's a state-federal match.
Okay.
So essentially, states send money to Washington, Washington sends back typically more.
Okay.
So in Kentucky, that's very much the case. For every dollar that's billed for a Medicaid waiver service, or for services and institutions for that matter, nursing homes or intermediate care facilities for people with intellectual disabilities, Kentucky sends 30 cents, federal government sends 70.
Okay.
So that's pretty good return on the dollar, right? So if we don't send our 30, we don't get any more money. So this settlement was huge. The settlement was there was a great deal of essentially Kentucky taxpayer dollars that were invested to create the Michelle P. waiver. And I haven't done the math, not going to do the math, but you could, 10,500 people times $40,000, take 30%. I mean, you could, that was a lot of money. And I'm not sure they sent it all at once, but over a period of years, we're going to grow this waiver to be 10,500. At that same time, I think it was $15,200,000 was allocated to grow the supports for community living waiver, which was huge. So actually there are now, this is 2019, that's 13 years ago, there are many now more providers who can provide that service because there's been more funding to serve more people. Does that help?
Yes.
So the intention was to help with this huge waiting list need. Now, so we're going to track up to 2019, because 10,500 people sounds like a lot, doesn't it?
Yes.
And in the intervening years, there has been some allocation of new funding. So actually, I'm sorry, the settlement was for 10,000 people. Between then and now, an addition money's been allocated for another 500. So that's why we have 10,500 people. But now what's happened is that there hasn't been any really big, huge new allocation of funding. And it's my understanding there may be close to 7,000 people on the Michelle P. waiver waiting list right now. So if you're not on the waiting list, you need to get on it, because you'll never get it if you don't get on it. And so the Department of Medicaid Services has actually been involved in doing what's called Waiver Redesign. And some of the families listening may have heard of that. To me, it's really a good thing to take stock of where we are, how we might do things better. And part of that is to look at, are there some efficiencies that could be accomplished, because there's no new money, so that maybe some people don't really need 40 hours a week of service. And so then maybe could there be money that could go towards someone on the waiting list. So I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's a good thing that we're taking a look at what we're doing and whether we could do things better. So all that to say is that right now, if you do not have the Michelle P. waiver, you need to get on the waiting list, because you won't ever get it if you don't get on the waiting list. But essentially, the services that are provided include community living supports that can help help somebody to learn how to shop, might help them learn how to do their laundry, can also take the person out into the community and do their banking, or even just to have a good time. It could also be about trying to connect people. So if somebody wanted to volunteer, maybe they could help, just kind of figure out the logistics of all that would involve. And then there's probably the other major service that people use is respite, to give a break for the family. And once someone has graduated, and the services that probably would be most likely would be used would include supported employment. So I really am going to say to all you parents to really encourage your children, whatever age, to do chores, to become as competent as possible, because now Kentucky is an employment first state, and it really is. The governor signed an executive order a year ago, May, that is that employment should be the first option considered for people with disabilities, regardless of impact of disability. Not forcing people to go to work, but really making that available. There are now in schools pre-employment transition services, which are extraordinary. So if you haven't heard about those, and if your child is 16, be asking about them. But to really prepare children to grow up to be adults And a big expectation of being adult is what?
Absolutely, working,
We work.
contributing.
We work. And that gives people a sense of purpose, identity, and also relationships. So supported employment is a service within the Michelle P. Waiver that then can help people, if they have a job in high school, to continue to be supported after high school, or if they want a new job or something falls apart, to help them find a new job.
Okay.
And so for example, I know of a young man who lives in Bardstown, which is still in this neck of the woods, not too far away, but who actually had services through the Michelle P. Waiver. He did attend the Guthrie Opportunity Center, which I think is in, I forget where, it's in this neck of the woods. How's that? It's in this neck of the woods. Actually, it's run by Communicare, which is a kind of sheltered workshop or day training program. But then supported employment services became available, and he actually now has a full-time job at Best Buy.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so I mean, there are lots of really, really great stories. There's a lot of supported employment that's going on. So again, we also have data at the Human Development Institute. We collect data 1 year out, post-high school data. You know, what are you up to? A year after high school, what are you up to? And we really have data that shows that students who worked in high school are doing better.
Okay.
They're just doing better.
So family really needs
to encourage that, and to really think about that, and to think about your own networks. I don't know about you, Katie, but my mother got me my first job.
Same.
I mean, you know, and I bet if we talk to all of you, that there's often a personal connection.
Yes, absolutely.
Probably every job I've ever had except one. You've worked your networks. I knew some, so it really is a function of relationships, and that's true for students with disabilities as well. And then the other big the service that a lot of people do use is something called day training. But again, with the Employment First initiative, with these pre-employment transition services, there really is just such opportunity now for students to really explore a career path.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean they're going to work full-time, 40 hours a week, but ideally could at least work part-time.
Yeah.
And then maybe could look at other volunteer opportunities. Last night we actually sponsored a webinar that included 3 young adults, all of whom had disabilities, all of whom had IEPs. I don't know if you knew Megan McCormick when you were at the Human Development Institute.
Yeah.
But Megan has Down syndrome. Actually, yesterday was International World Day for Down syndrome. So in any event, but Megan's an extraordinary young woman, highly disciplined, but Megan graduated and then actually went to BCTC and got her associate's degree. She is now a paraeducator at Mill Creek Elementary School.
That's wonderful.
And she has Michelle P. Waiver, and that's helped her, support her to do these things.
Okay.
And she's actually, and again, she's the most disciplined person I think I've ever met. She really is, but she's actually pursuing her bachelor's now.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
At UK. And again, not 18 hours a semester, but working 3 days a week, going to school. And then Clay Carroll, who lives in Dunville, Kentucky, which is Casey County, he actually now has 3 jobs.
Oh, wow.
3 part-time jobs, or maybe 2 part-time jobs and 1 volunteer job, and then
busy.
So busy,
Yes.
but I mean, and again, Clayton has the Michelle P. Waiver. That's really helped him to be as independent as possible. So just it is really helpful. So if you're not on the waiting list, get on the waiting list, but also don't assume that when your son or daughter graduates, you're going to have it. Now, I would say that the way for there to be expansion of the Michelle P. Waiver is, again, the governor and the General Assembly have to allocate more funding.
Okay.
So contact your state representative and your state senator and let them know how important this would be to you. So, and again, like the home and community-based waiver, it can also be participant directed. So participant directed is also part of supports for community living waiver, and this looks kind of unusual, what we have on our website. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to take you to the supports for community living waiver website through, again, the Cabinet for Health and Family Resources, the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. And so this will give you right here what all of the services are.
Oh, wow.
So yes, but the main difference is, because actually Michelle P. Waiver has behavior supports.
Okay.
So the big difference between these services is really this residential support services.
Okay.
So the supports for community living waiver really does provide services to people who require, quote, support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Okay.
So there is it's a heterogeneous grouping of people. There's not a single story.
Gotcha.
So you have people some have very pervasive support needs, some people have kind of moderate support needs, and some people have very little, but they still are not, they wouldn't be able to live alone.
Understand.
Because of the impact, again, usually of an intellectual disability.
Okay.
So the Michelle P. Waiver, the supports for community living waiver, again, just like the Michelle P. Waiver, requires that one get on a waiting list. And so this will describe that again. Again, there's that website, Benefind. But so everything's done now through Benefind.
Okay.
And my understanding is that that CUNY-CARE, as your community mental health center, should have somebody who can help you
Correct.
do that. Okay. Although you can do it yourself. I mean, certainly there are people who could most likely manage this themselves, but just know that they could get help. If you want help, you should be able to get that through CUNY-CARE. Now, at the present time, there are approximately, actually I know, we have the ability to serve 4,941 people.
Okay.
I have no idea why that exact number, but that's, again, that math. Somehow that 30-70 match. And at any given time, there may be some, I would say, openings, for lack of a better term. And that's really a function of the fact that, frankly, people die.
Okay.
So the SCL waiver has been, actually, its first ideation started in 1982.
Okay.
As a result of a lawsuit.
Okay. There you go.
That parents filed against the Cabinet for Health and Family Services that was probably called something different then. They wanted to rebuild an institution in far west Kentucky.
Okay.
And at that point in our history, we were really moving toward, and the country was moving much toward trying to figure out how do we help people live in the community. And so the ARC of Kentucky, which I would encourage you to join for $25, filed a lawsuit.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, the decision was made to rebuild the facility for 80 people, and 160 people needed a new place to live.
Okay.
So for the first time, Kentucky invested funds to help those people move. That was called New Neighbors. We then wrote a waiver, and over years, that waiver name changed to Supports for CUNY Living back in the late 90s.
Okay.
And actually, HDI had a role all along, and actually, we had a major role in helping to create the Hart Support Living program.
Okay.
So. Even though a lot of what we do is kind of behind the scenes, we try to help impact systemic change in our work. So the SCL waiver is the gold card waiver, I say. It's the gold card waiver. And there are, I think, maybe 2,900 people on that waiting list. Now, of that 2,900, for example, my friend Linda, whom I'm her financial manager and I'm her power of attorney. She's on that SCL waiting list, but she does have Michelle P. Waiver services. So of that 2,900 people, some of those folks, maybe a lot of them actually may have the Michelle P. Waiver.
Okay.
So you could be on the Michelle P. Waiver and be on a waiting list.
Can you have two?
No.
Nope.
I knew you were going to ask that. You can be on one and be on a waiting list. Or I know of families that are on the home and community, have the home and community-based waiver.
Okay.
These are all actually home and community-based waivers, but one is called that.
Okay.
It makes it confusing here in Kentucky. And then they're on the waiting list for maybe the Michelle P. And maybe even the SCL waiver.
Okay.
But only one waiver at a time.
Okay.
So
you can be on more than one waiting list.
You can be on more than one waiting list.
If you might qualify for more than one waiver, you can
try.
Work with CUNY-CARE or whoever to figure out and potentially get on multiple waiting lists. You
might be able to. Now, Benefind's going to decide that for you, but at least you'd be on one.
Gotcha.
But I think you could probably, how about try?
Okay.
Try. Okay, so again, these are amazing programs. They really help support people to live in the community. But however, what I would like to suggest to you though is that you're going to have to safeguard your child's eligibility, financial eligibility for Medicaid. So I want to talk just briefly about just one thing I would encourage you to do, because families don't know about this, and it's a really, really great opportunity. So your son or daughter, when they have the opportunity, so maybe you get that letter and says that you're eligible for the Michelle P. Waiver, they're going to make sure that your child meets what's called level of care eligibility, and then they're also going to look at financial eligibility. So I want to encourage you to explore a stable account. So back in 2014, again as the result of tremendous advocacy for over 10 years of parents on a national level, the ABLE Act was passed. So that's Achieving a Better Life Experience. So it allows people with disabilities who want to maintain eligibility for means-tested government benefits, though, to be able to save. So you could open a stable account for your son or daughter right now, assuming that at some point they may be eligible for Medicaid. And as long as the disability occurred before the age of 26, you're eligible. Which would be true, I would assume, of the majority of folks that are listening to this recording. So Stable Kentucky is Kentucky's ABLE program. And so you go to this website, stablekentucky.com, and you would open an account. It takes $50 to open an account. So, however, it's $3.50 a month to have the account, so you clearly would want to be putting more money in. But it's awesome in that it allows for earnings on savings to be tax-free. So I don't know, Katie, if you had a 529 plan when you went to college.
I did.
Well, so you're familiar with 529 plans. So your family could save for your college expenses, post-secondary expenses. This is a 529A plan.
Gotcha.
So same tax code. So with your 529 plan, I don't know, what could you spend the money on, Katie?
I used it to pay part of my rent costs in college, textbooks. There were, I guess, several things that I used to pay for. Some tuition costs that weren't covered. So a lot of different things were eligible.
Yes. But it related to your education.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm going to bet not your spring break trip to Daytona.
Unfortunately not.
No, right. So similarly, with a stable account, you have to spend the money. In order to get that tax-free savings and no tax penalty, you have to spend the money on qualified disability expenses.
That makes sense.
Okay, so yours were qualified educational expenses, qualified disability expenses. So this website will tell you about that. But so in order to get that tax-free savings, which is just awesome. So again, the majority of you listening would be eligible because your child's disability occurred before the age of 26. Families can contribute up to $15,000 a year. And that means anybody. So if you, mom and dad, you open a stable account, but grandma and grandpa want to put money in, or aunts or uncles, or your child, and actually this will send emails to people to say, it's my birthday. Make a gift to my stable account. Well, because often, wouldn't that be, maybe kids have enough stuff, so you could put money into the stable account. And so you can put up to $15,000 a year, and if employed, and not contributing to a retirement plan, an employer retirement plan, you can actually put in additional money. Now, this is not a savings account. This is an investment account. So one would want to click here to learn more. And because when you put money into it, you need to choose what investment accounts you're going to use. And then here are but look at all these categories for qualified expenses: basic living expenses, housing, transportation, education, assistive technology, employment training, personal support services, legal fees, health and wellness, financial management. And if you have questions, there's an 800 number or an email. So I have opened a stable account for Linda because Linda actually, and I'll go back to working. So Linda actually now is 66 and is retired. She's very clear she's not working any longer, and good for her. But Linda's a person with an intellectual disability who was born before there was any right to education.
Gotcha.
Okay, so she was born in 1952, so she didn't go to school. But had opportunities through, again, probably more through segregated options, sheltered workshops, but to work. And so she's worked well over 30 years of her life. And when you work, you pay payroll taxes into your own Social Security number. And so she received a benefit when I started managing her money back in about 2003. She received a benefit from her own Social Security account as a disabled worker because she'd worked enough, contributed enough. And so she's always worked, always maintained her eligibility for that benefit, and always had whatever health insurance she needed. So I want to say that to you, that work and all of these waivers just work really nicely together. So Linda now has a very substantial retirement benefit because she worked. So actually, because she has the Michelle P. waiver, I have to be concerned about that $2,000 resource limit. So back to your children, if they get that wonderful letter saying that they're eligible for the Michelle P. waiver and they've got $15,000 in savings bonds, they're not going to qualify for Medicaid. That's more than $2,000. So put that money in a stable account. So if you had $15,000 in a stable accment, when you apply for Medicaid, it's excluded. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay,
so you're able to access those programs.
We're able to, but still, you really can have your money in Medicaid too. How's that? You can have your money in Medicaid too, but it has to be in a certain place. But I also think about those of you who may have very young children. Well, I don't know if families with young children would be listening, but families of young children, if they're able to start a savings program early on and think about it growing for 20 years tax-free.
And that kind of brings me to, is there any age that you should really start looking at the waivers, or the sooner
It's never
the
too
better?
early. It's never too early. It can be too late. I mean, we know we have 10,700 caregivers over the age of 60 who have an adult with a developmental disability living with them. So in terms of that SCL waiver, you're competing. I mean, literally, CommuniCare is probably getting calls this week, literally. Mom has died. Where do I take my 42-year-old brother with Down syndrome? I mean, that's a very, very real issue in Kentucky. So
even if you just have a young child,
start looking, and then, but also be equipping that child to be as competent and capable and independent as possible. And then if you can, to save, because really, if one had the capacity to save $10,000, $15,000 a year, which I know probably many of you don't, but something. If you think about that growing over the lifetime of your child tax-free, you'd almost have your own whatever your child's name is waiver. It wouldn't be a waiver, but you could have, and I know of families that are really carpe diem, they're seizing the day and have the resources to do this. So again, back, our directory, I think that's the end of it, the end of our resources. But again, most likely, people that I know, again, with quite a lot of time in the saddle, so to speak, again, Linda's parents are dead. And I've actually served in this role for 2 other people whose parents were dead. And so just that when it works really well is when families have done the planning and have tried to access the public services, but have also looked at trying to figure out how their son or daughter will have an income, and then what they as a family can do. So it's like a public-private partnership.
Okay.
And in Linda's life, I'm really grateful Linda has the Michelle P. Waiver. But there needs to be at least one person in that person's life that is going to be kind of like the champion or the glue.
Understand.
Because the services are awesome, but people come and go.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I appreciate this, Katie, and I hope it's been helpful.
It has.
Hope it's been helpful.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Well, you're
Thank
welcome.
you all for watching.